Evergreen from the 1976 soundtrack A Star Is Born was one of Barbra Streisand's number one hits. The lyrics in this song are incredible, really spells out what unconditional love looks like, and although they're really talking about a man and a woman in this song, it's pretty evident that that love comes from God. And in today's episode, Brenda Michelle Robinson from Anatomy of the Sacred is going to be here to talk a little bit about that song and tell us a little bit more about who they are as a band. Buckle up, stay tuned, we're ready to rock.
Welcome to the Song and Verse Podcast, a discovery of God's Word, one song and a few verses at a time. Here's your host, Rockin' Odd Todd.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Song and Verse Podcast, a discovery of God's Word through song and verse. I am your host, Rocking Odd Todd, and we're so happy you decided to join us today. You know, certain songs really say a lot about a time period, but other songs carry with them a meaning that goes much further than that. And we learned from Dr. Carrie Fink that nostalgia tunes are ones that you can remember from your time period of music. And then evergreen songs are ones that just transcend over time and give you chills and that feeling of just what that song is actually about, not so much the time that it came from. And this song, Evergreen, has that same name, but it also has that same meaning, because when you look at these lyrics and you look at what it's actually about, you see it's about the unconditional love of our Creator, and it's just a really beautiful thing to see. Now, in this episode today, Brenda Michelle Robinson from Anatomy of the Sacred is with us, and man, she has a lot to say about this song, and she's got a lot to say about who they are as a band. And it was really cool catching up with Brenda, because, you know, there's not too many times you see genres crossing over. In this episode, we talked a little bit about Evanescence and Amy Lee, that band and how they do it, but it's not something you see every day. And so it was really cool to talk to Brenda about what it is that makes Anatomy of the Sacred special and what it really is that makes that genre its own brand, which she labeled beautiful metal. This was a really fun episode. Really enjoyed talking to Brenda, and I hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. And with that, we have Brenda Michelle Robinson from Anatomy of the Sacred today. How's it going, Brenda?
It's going good. It's
Awesome.
going really good. I'm very happy to be here.
So awesome. So cool. So, you know, I've read a little bit about Anatomy of the Sacred, but, you know, it's always better to hear from the person that has thought this up and, you know, what exactly it is that you guys are doing. So I really want to know more about Anatomy of the Sacred, how you came up with the name, the concept, you and your bandmates, all that good stuff. Let's hear more about who you guys are.
Okay. All right. Well, Shane Kraut is my partner in music, and we started Anatomy of the Sacred. We were previously together in another project, and we wanted to work on original music and write original music. And so we talked about, you know, starting a band. And we went through, I don't know how many different possible names for bands. And, you know, we did the usual thing where people go out to the internet and put, you know, do random band name searches, you know, those little engines that you can pull stuff into.
Sure, yeah.
And come up with all these different names. So we ended up with, I think, a list of about, I don't know, maybe 50 that we kind of knew. And one of the names that I had thrown out there was Anatomy of the Sacred. And I don't want to give too much away. Well, actually I will, but it's actually based on a book from one of my college classes. And the book is called Anatomy of the Sacred. Huh. And I always thought that was such a cool name. And we settled on that name largely because we wanted something that we felt embodied the kind of music that we want to write. You know, we want music that's going to touch people's hearts. We want people to be impacted by our music, the lyrics, and the song as a whole. when we're writing. And we just felt like, you know, we as human beings, we embody, you know, our whole entire being is something that is sacred. Our humanity is something that's sacred.
Right.
And we wanted to write music that really, really encompassed that and talked about those things and talked about, you know, embracing things like fear and love and passion and all the different things that people go through on a regular basis. So we kind of felt like Anatomy of the Sacred really encompassed our goal for writing music and coming together as a team. And so that's what we ended up with.
Well, and I think that's a really cool narrative because, you know, so at Song and Verse Ministries, we look at music as a narrative to begin with. And we look at, you know, just being able to speak with each other. It's like, if you go down to Brazil, you better know Spanish. And if you go, you know, whatever part of the country or the world, you need to know that language. And there's certain things in life that we see as being universal. And music, in a way, is one of those.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool that you look at it that way, because it really sounds like it's a narrative about life and the sacred elements. Just life in general is sacred, but
yeah,
sort of like those things that just draw humanity together. It's like we're all this anatomy together. It's not just us individually, but collectively.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, you know, we need each other.
Mm-hmm.
We humanity is one race. We need each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it would be unreasonable to believe that it's impossible for others to experience something that maybe I'm going through, or, you know, I embody all the humanity necessary to experience all things. And so therefore, you know, I want to write music that touches on those things and really expresses the things that people are dealing with and experiencing. And I want to write music that is going to be empowering to people and make them feel some sense of relief or some joy in their life. You know, one of the things that one of the monikers that we've been given is Anatomy of the Sacred is beautiful metal. And I love that someone gave that to us, because it really is. We want our music to be beautiful, and we want it to encompass all things that are beautiful. And I believe that we do that. I think that we do that with our writing.
No, I definitely agree. And I noticed you had sent me a couple songs, and I know one of them really kind of dealt with some darker elements, like maybe even like a suicidal type situation. And, you know, with everything that we've gone through in this year, this 2020, it's interesting that, you know, the narrative has kind of gone this direction, because I think so many people are dealing with, you know, darker moments of their life even than they ever really expected to. And I think sometimes when you're able to put those in song and bring a narrative that might, you know, uplift a little bit in the process, and see, like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one struggling. You know, that's a powerful element that we have in music. And I see it as a gift, you know, from our Heavenly Father, for us to express those things, and those expressions just kind of transcending across all humanity, and not just, you know, it seems like, and you may agree with this in an extent, but like, I'm sure you have a certain fan base that you maybe draw in more than others. And so maybe your music speaks more to them, but at the same time, there's still elements that speak to all humanity, if that makes sense.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But we're made so unique, you know, in our walks, in our faith, in our being, that we do relate better with certain people more than others. But that's not to negate those that we may not, you know, so to speak. So we
really try to do a good job of making our music as universal as possible. We want it to speak to everyone, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, no matter what their age is, no matter what their beliefs are. We want our music to speak to everyone. And I think that that's a good goal to have as a songwriter. You want your songs to be as universal as possible, so that you reach as many people as possible. And again, that goes back to, the focus and the core beliefs of Anatomy of the Sacred is we want to encompass all those things that are human and that people go through and deal with on a daily basis, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, moral or amoral. So, that's kind of our goal. So.
Well, and what's kind of cool is I think we sort of met up through like the Fridays with Alice aspect of, online in that group and on that page. But tell us a little bit more about like the influences that you've had, musically, because in this episode, they've already kind of seen the cover of it and everything else. We've got a Barbra Streisand element, and we're talking about metal. So the two of those coming together is not quite an audience that most people would expect. So let's hear about that.
I have to tell you, metal is not a genre that I would have ever have expected myself to be in. And I tell people all the time, my background is contemporary Christian music, gospel music. I grew up in a family where we listened to everything from bluegrass to country to rock to R&B, blues, jazz. I was exposed to all those things. Metal was not one of them. And that's so funny to me because when I moved to Pennsylvania, I started reaching out to folks, trying to, touch base with people, try to get something going musically. And I answered an ad that Shane had placed in PA Musician magazine. He was looking for a vocalist for his project. And I saw the ad, and he said it was for a symphonic metal band. And I don't remember the details, but he listed all these bands that I had never heard of, except for Evanescence. And I knew he had me at Evanescence because I absolutely love that band. And I knew I could sing anything that they could do. So I touched base with him. He sent me the tracks, and I went in and auditioned and nailed every single one of them. And I fell in love with that genre. Now, not the darkness of the genre, okay, because I'm not into any of the death metal stuff. I'm not into, things where people are hurting each other or talking about killing themselves or anything like that. That's not me. But I fell in love with the beauty of the symphonic metal genre in terms of all these amazing women that are out there singing this music, and all of these amazing composers that are writing such beautiful melodies. I tell everybody that is when I really feel like I found my voice. And, when I started working with Shane, some of the stuff that he writes is it's amazing. It's like he wrote it for me before he even knew he wrote it for me. And of course, I was writing music, and some of the music that I've written fits in absolutely perfectly with what he's written long before we even knew each other. So it's really, it's very interesting to see how our paths have brought us together. And I totally believe that, it's something that we're supposed to be doing right now. And a lot of people from back home in Kansas City probably don't understand it. There's a lot of folks that You know, they feel like if you are a vocalist or you're a songwriter, that you automatically have to be in music ministry. That's your thing. You need to be going out to churches every weekend, taking love offerings, singing songs, and those types of things. And that's fine for some people, but that's not what I felt like I wanted to do. I wanted to sing all kinds of music. I wanted to be able to go and, you know, do Christmas shows with Michael Clayton Moore's Silent Night production. I wanted to do recordings, all those types of things. And going back to Barbra Streisand, you know, if you're a vocalist, especially a female vocalist, and you don't know who she is, I question whether or not you're a vocalist.
Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Right.
When I was growing up, first of all, my mother was just a phenomenal vocalist. She never did anything with her talent, which is really sad, but she was an amazing vocalist. And so many people in my family were just extremely talented musicians. They did it all for fun. When I grew up, I wanted to do that for a living. That's what I wanted to do professionally. And I remember just constantly singing any Barbra Streisand song I could ever think of. I could hear, you know, my aunt and uncle would supply me with albums from, you know, Barry Manilow to her, to Whitney Houston, I mean, you name it. It was Heart is a huge part of my background. And I latched on to all those things, and all of that became a part of me as a vocalist and a songwriter. And I'm extremely, extremely thankful to have all of that in my background.
You know, that's so cool. And you touched on a few points there that are pretty interesting to me. You know, number one, and you've probably found this as you've gone on and gotten a little bit into that metal genre, it's misunderstood in many ways.
Yes,
you know?
It is.
And, you know, you look at a Barbra Streisand versus, like, you know, I'm just pulling one out of a hat, but like Megadeth or something.
Yeah.
And they're both talking about real life elements.
That's right. Yeah.
Some of them may, you know, some metal bands may take a darker approach and focus a little bit more on the darker, more painful moments of life, but, you know, they're still just talking about experience. And it, you know, it was something where, you know, of course, I grew up listening to heavy metal, hard rock, all that good stuff, but it was during the 80s and the hair bands, and like, those were just about having fun mostly. You know, it wasn't like, it wasn't the same as what, you know, it really kind of took a turn in some ways, I guess, with Metallica and some of those which were out in the 80s, but it was the sound of the guitar and everything else, and not always so much the lyrics. It was just the actual music, you know, so to speak. I know with like Black Sabbath and stuff, they tune down their guitars like half step or whole step or whatever, and just a darker sound. But I think it's interesting that you bring all that up, because the music, when we talk about it as a narrative, it is almost like it's a different language in all these different genres, you know, English, Spanish, Italian, or whatever, but you really have like metal, hard rock, you know, pure singing. You know, what genre is Barbra Streisand? Just singer, songwriter, or what?
I don't even know, honestly. Yeah. She's done so many different things. She's like an enigma. Yeah, you know?
Yeah.
Honestly, she really is.
Yeah, her and a few singers
Dion,
like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Celine Dion, Aretha Franklin, you know, just, she probably fits in that diva category, I guess, really,
Yeah.
I guess that's the way to look at it. But we talked a little bit about the song Evergreen, which, you know, I think my mom and dad listened to a lot of Barbra Streisand. I didn't listen to her so much, but I remember her being a huge presence in the 80s with her acting career and the soundtracks and all that stuff. And when you brought that song to my attention, I was like, wow, I mean, the lyrics in the song are pretty phenomenal. The host, songwriter, singer combo, sometimes it gets lost that you're like, oh, well, that person didn't write that song. Well, that person brought life to that song.
Yeah, that's right.
And the two of them together, you know, whoever conceptualized the lyrics for it, you know, if you had somebody else singing, if you had Willie Nelson singing this song versus Barbra Streisand singing this song, it's gonna be two completely different ways that it's expressed. To me, the words in this were just you know, incredible, as far as it's an ageless and unconditional evergreen love. And
That's right.
I think that's really kind of what you were bringing to the table with, you know, when you were picking this song. So, you know, from the singing aspect, I get it. From your faith aspect, what does it say to you?
Oh, you know, I was thinking about this the other day, and you know, I have so many artists and so many songs that I just absolutely love. I can't peg one specific person or genre that I feel has impacted me the most, because it's just all of it is like, you know, feathers in my wings, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything has helped build that. But I actually, I reached out to my Aunt Cheryl. She is like my one of my favorite people in the whole world. And I asked her, I'm like, Aunt Cheryl, do you remember, like, what do you remember hearing me singing all the time growing up? And she's like, definitely Barbra Streisand. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And I'm like, do you remember any particular song? And she's like, Evergreen. And I'm like, yeah, that was one of my favorites. Absolutely one of my favorites. And it was a favorite to me before I became a Christian. Mm-hmm. And it's still a favorite to me even now as a Christian.
Yeah.
The words of that song are just beautiful. And they talk about this perfect love. And obviously the lyrics are very universal, which is genius writing, obviously. But the lyrics basically give you a vision of a man and a woman and this absolute perfect love that they have for one another. And that's something that we all want, and that's something that we all strive for. But it's not possible for us to have it as human beings without a relationship with Christ.
Right.
And that's the core of that. In order to make that work, in order to have that perfect love, we can't expect unreasonable expectations from one another. We can't expect one another to be perfect. And that's something that we do every single day in our society. We are looking at people and immediately judging them and making a determination as to, you know, whether they're good, bad, indifferent. You know, are they on my side? Are they on your side? All these different things, and it ruins that love relationship that we need to have with one another. And it reminded me of one of my favorite devotionals by Oswald Chambers, and it's the teaching of disillusionment. And it talks about how, you know, Jesus was never suspicious of anyone. He was never disillusioned by anyone because he knew what was in humanity. And that is profound to me, because if we look at the lyrics of the song Evergreen, we see that and we think, man, that is a perfect love. But it's not possible without God being in the middle of it.
Right. Because
we always fail each other. We are never going to be perfect. And trust me, I'm a perfectionist. I want everything done perfectly. That's just who I am. And it's very easy for me because of that to be disappointed. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. And, you know, we are very easily disillusioned by everything in our world nowadays. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody, you know, wants to share their opinion when they probably shouldn't. And
if you don't agree, then whoa.
Yeah, it's like, okay, where's the love for one another? Where is that evergreen love for one another that renews every single moment and every single day? that isn't disillusioned by imperfection.
Right.
And that's what makes that song so absolutely incredible, is trying to view each other with that type of evergreen type love for one another.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad I picked that song, because it was great to revisit it again.
Totally. And you know, that that particular devotion you're talking about, he was really looking at John 2:24-25, which says, but Jesus didn't trust them because he knew all about people. No one needed to tell him about human nature, for he knew what was in each person's heart. And you're really speaking to that, because it's like the author of creation is the author of love. And when it talks about that human nature, we just don't have that ability to love unconditionally the way that the author does. And, you know, incorporating him into our relationships is that huge step, but we still falter and fail. And, you know, I think Jesus did a great job of trying to convey that, you know, in this scripture, that I still know what a person's heart looks like. Without God, it's not complete. And, you know, it's one of those things where when you're walking, there's going to be times when you're not looking at him, you know, kind of like Peter outside walking on the water, you know, of the boat there. And every time he takes his eyes off Christ, he starts to, you know, sink a little bit. Right. And it's the same way with us. If, you know, if you're in traffic and someone cuts you off, let me tell you, my eyes probably aren't on Christ at that moment. They're on those taillights, and I'm, you know, but no, that's really kind of what that all reminded me of, is just that, you know, perfection comes from him, and we're really not going to ever be completely God or completely whole in this life. You know, there's that hole that we're constantly trying to plug in. And so many other things in this world are vying for that little place in our heart. And keeping that filled with God is a tough thing to do when people, things, you know, material goods, whatever it is that wants that chunk of our heart, we allow it at times, you know. And so that's it's an interesting narrative, an interesting way to look at it. And I just love that term evergreen. You know, we had a episode quite a few episodes back where they talked about this. It's a radio show called Music of Your Life. And they really talked about, there's two types of songs. There's an evergreen song and a nostalgic type song. And the nostalgia is the time period you grew up in, makes you think of that kind of thing. And then an evergreen song is one that just transcends, you know, like New York, you're always going to think of New York. And to me, and I never knew this song beforehand, but anybody during that time period, or even that sees or hears this song, is going to be not only brought back to that time period, but what the song's actually talking about. And, you know, there's not a whole lot of songs. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say there's not a whole lot, but most songs you remember because of the time period, and not all of them you remember because, man, that was just a great song. The lyrics in that touch me more than, you know, other things. It's like when I hear music, a lot of the times it's like, oh, I remember being a teenager driving my car listening to this one, you know, or whatever, and not so much of how a song made you feel, you know. And those are the songs that I love, the ones that make the hairs on your arm and the goosebumps and you know, all of that kind of thing. That's my element when it comes to music, because it means it's speaking to my soul, it's speaking to my spirit, you know. And
I remember the first time I heard the song Evergreen, my stepmother actually gave me the cassette tape of Barbra Streisand's album that had it on there. And she, you know, I think I was probably, I don't know, maybe somewhere between 13 and 15 years old when I first heard it. but she knew that I loved singing, and she knew that, you know, there was definitely a talent there. And, you know, like several people in my family, she wanted to try to grow that. And when she handed me the cassette tape, she said, I want you to try to sing Evergreen. And I think you can do it. And so I listened to that song. Oh my God, I can't even tell you how many times. And I did my best to nail it as best I could. And there's nobody as good as Barbra, but I tell you what, I did a pretty fantastic job of it. But it was her belief in me that spurred on that growth. And I'll never forget that to this day, because from that point, you know, it went on to vocal lessons. From that point, it went on to, you know, performances, to, of course, where I am now, vocally and as a songwriter. So I'm very thankful that, number one, the song was written, because it had a huge impact on where I am now. So yeah, that's pretty fantastic.
Well, you know, and I want to spin this back around to Anatomy of the Sacred in a few minutes, but I think you're really touching on a few things that are really cool, because, you know, you talk about your stepmother here, and you've talked about your aunt, and you've talked about, you know, family members, and isn't it cool to see how music does that as well, that certain songs link us to other people and other family members, friends, things of that nature as well. Because I can think of certain songs and I'd be like, man, I remember hanging out with this person. This makes me think of that person, you know, and
That's right.
And just those relationships. And, you know, and I don't know if you've ever heard the song Friends from Michael W. Smith, but you know, friends are friends forever if the Lord's a Lord of them. And man, that's just so true, that we're intertwined and interconnected in so many ways. And that works really well with the name of your all's band and what you guys are all about anyway. It's really awesome to see how in a conversation you really start to put these pieces together and see where the Lord's trying to go with a certain narrative. And I think that's really what this whole ministry is about, believe it or not, is unity. And not only unity in the body of Christ, because that's important, and I don't see a whole lot of that sometimes. I think religion gets in the way and kind of separates us all into these little denominational categories and how we see theology and stuff. But it happens in humanity as well. And I think as Christians, sometimes we really lose sight of that thing, that we're called to love everyone, not just brothers and sisters in the faith, not just people you agree with, you know, your enemy. Jesus points straight to your enemies and says you love them. And that's totally the narrative of you guys and what we're trying to talk about and everything else. And that's just beautiful to see come together. But I guess what I'm really wanting to know a little bit more about of Anatomy of the Sacred is, like, who comes out to see your shows? What does Anatomy of the Sacred fan, what does one of their fans look like? Are they all kinds of hodgepodge? Is it only metal? Is it only singing? I'm intrigued by this because it reminds me of Trans-Siberian Orchestra a little bit. And when you go to that show, there's people from everywhere going to that, So tell me a little bit more about, who is this focus on? And you mentioned Shane sees it as a project. What does all that look like? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, first of all, to be compared to Trans-Siberian Orchestra is such a huge compliment, because we have been told that our music is very similar to that.
Sure.
And again, our goal in writing is to try to make our music as universal as possible, and beautiful and impactful, and something that reaches people's hearts. Our audience, it's amazing to me. Our music, I handle all the business for Anatomy of the Sacred, the music side of the business, or the business side of the music. And when I look at the demographic for the band, our demographic is very equal between male and female, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's really wild.
And we have our age demographic is anywhere from 18 to 50 plus.
Wow, that's awesome.
Which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to people who are listening to our music, we have people all over the world that are listening, which is awesome. And when it comes to shows, we have people of all ages coming out to our shows. That's what we want.
Yeah.
That's what we want. It's very similar to Evanescence and their demographic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have people of all ages, all faiths, you name it, all over the board, because it reaches people's hearts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all about the heart and about what makes up our anatomy as human beings. And we are reaching humanity with our music. So it's all across the boards. We have people of all faiths that come out, and again, all age brackets. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Well, that is cool, because what that really speaks to is, like you just said, your whole goal of it all and what you guys are really trying to do, and that it's working, because you don't normally see that in an audience unless it's a band that's been around for generations, like if I go to an Alice Cooper show, I'm going to see that demographic. I'm 18 all the way up to 60 and 70-year-olds even,
Yeah.
And, but that's a testament to 50 years worth of music,
Yeah.
And so that's really huge in a band that, is quite a bit younger, and to be able to get an audience of that same magnitude. And that's really, really interesting and cool to see. And for you to be able to say, "Hey, this is who we want our audience to be," and then that be who your audience is, that's really cool to be able to tap in and do that,
If I can hug you, I want you to be an audience member.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Awesome. Yeah. So you've talked about your faith and where you're at, as far as your love for Christ, and how we've talked about that fills that hole. But, in the music business, you deal with all sorts of types, all people from all different walks of faith, all different walks of ethnicity, everything else. It's a diverse field.
Right.
So what is it like to share the stage with people with different faiths, or, who has the same faith, who doesn't, that sort of deal? How does that work with you guys?
Well, it's really no different than working in corporate America.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense.
I mean, if you have a day job in corporate America, you're going to work every day with people that come from all different backgrounds,
Sure.
all different faiths. And hopefully you have one goal and one vision, and that is to do your very best job that you have been hired and paid to do.
It's amazing you put it that way, because why don't they see the entertainment industry and everything else that same way? It's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's a really good point.
I don't understand it either. That's always been a real pet peeve for me. I've never understood why it is that the church believes that if you have gifts and talents in music, you automatically have to go into music ministry. I don't understand that, because those same people will go to a Beyonce concert and totally lose it watching Beyonce perform.
Right.
They'll go to a movie which has musical scores supporting it. Somebody wrote that music who is talented. Okay. I mean, our world is filled with entertainment and music, singers, songwriters, people in the music industry. There is an industry that exists. And I felt like for myself, I did not feel like, I wanted to go down the path of being in music ministry. I wanted to be in the music business. I wanted to do it as a profession. And I wanted to be the very best singer songwriter that I absolutely could be, and do the very best job on the business side that I could.
Mm-hmm.
And that means working with people that are different from you every day, but you're all striving hopefully for the same goals, and that is to do your very best job within the music industry.
Sure.
To me, it's really no different than corporate America. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful people in the music industry. There are some not so wonderful people in the music industry, but you know what? I feel like it's my job to try to show them as much love as I possibly can. But I also have to have boundaries, and I have to be wise, and I have to be smart about my relationships as well. Because not everybody in this world, no matter where you are, even in the church, is out there to, they don't always have your best interest at heart.
Sure.
And there are people that want to hurt you, and there are people that want to do you harm. And you have to be wise about, okay, do I love this person in spite of that? Or is this something that maybe I need to not have a relationship with that person? So it's really all about using wisdom. But again, you know what? God's the only one that knows that person's heart.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe by smiling at them, maybe by showing them kindness, maybe you can change their heart.
Sure.
You know, you never know. I just think that there's, and trust me, I am not a perfect person, and I've made mistakes. I make mistakes every day, but you know what? I'm always reminded of what I'm supposed to be doing, how I'm supposed to be behaving, how I'm supposed to be treating others, and I strive for that. And, you know, hopefully I'm better for it, and hopefully the others that are around me are better for it as well.
Well, and I hope that something that's being driven home here is the fact that we can't be perfect. We're not even striving for perfection. We're just striving to change our mindset to align better with Christ and his word, not try to live the unattainable, because we know we can't do that. So instead, let's change our mindset and our focus on what he told us to try and do it on. Because, I think that's a misconception. And I think that's one of the things that turns people off so much is the quote unquote hypocrisy of Christianity. And I think so many people look at Christians for Christ, and it's like, no, you got to look at Christ, and then you understand why Christians are so screwed up.
That's right.
Because we're never going to fulfill those things, and God knew that. That's why Jesus was sent. I mean, it's not so that we can be like, oh, I now have Christ, and you don't. You can't be who I am, and blah, blah, blah. No, it's none of that stuff. It's exactly what you're saying. It's the fact that I am so flawed that I need to lean on something more than me. And I need to understand that where that comes from, where that authority comes from, where that ability to love comes from. And, it's just a mindset and a walk, and it's a journey. And I think so many people that get wrapped up into the religious part of it, and that goes for Christians, atheists, everybody, in some form or fashion, it's a religion in some way. Mm-hmm. And if you are looking at the parameters and the sacraments and all of these other parts of that religion more than you are Christ, then you're already missing the boat, I guess, so to speak.
That's right. You're totally missing the point.
Yeah. And cause you can do as many, ritualistic things as you can possibly fit in one day. And that's not pointing to him. That's pointing to your worship starts to go in a different direction than where it's really supposed to go, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's really tough to put into words sometimes. And that's why I have such a hard time, really explaining it sometimes to others. It's more it more comes down to, look, this is just how I live my life. And I can talk to you about how I live that portion of it. And I can show you why and show you where, but it's really something you have to come to on your own. You can't,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we even talked about this in a few episodes past, where it's like, you could be raised in a Christian household. At some point, your parents' faith has to become your own faith.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. I remember growing up, I didn't want to have anything to do with Christianity.
Yeah.
Okay. My grandmother was a Christian. Several people in my family were Christians. I didn't want to have anything to do with it because I saw some examples of folks that I'm just like, if that's a Christian, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Sure.
But you know what? I realized that is not a good excuse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have the ability to do better, and I can't judge someone else for their failings in that area.
Sure.
And I remember that it's just something that grabbed a hold of my heart and just changed it, because I knew that I could do better. I acknowledged that, you know what, I do believe in God. I don't believe we are here by chance. I believe that there is something that created us. I do believe in my heart that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, no matter what others think. That's what I believe in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an awakening for me, and just something that happened. And I just, it gives you a different outlook on life. When I wake up every day, now granted, you know, I there's times when I'm anxious, there's times when I'm angry, there's times when I don't forgive somebody, there's times when I just want to give up on relationships and humanity. But ultimately, when I look around and I see one another, mm-hmm. and I see life in general, I see the absolute beauty that exists in our humanity, in our animals, in our creations that we make ourselves, and our talents and our gifts and our abilities. And I'm just amazed by that. I'm amazed at how people are put into each other's lives.
Yep.
And how beautifully orchestrated that is.
Yeah.
And it makes me just so thankful that I have that faith, because I believe that's where it comes from. So.
Well, and I think there's an underlying word there that's coming to my mind that's really about transparency. And I think that's something in the past that, you know, I hate to say the term religious folks, but anybody that really took the faith, it was almost like, well, we don't talk about those things. We don't talk about the places where we fail or where our sins lie and things of that nature. And I really almost feel like that made things worse, because then you start to live with this deep, dark secret, or this thing that's really gnawing away at your soul and your spirit. And there's so much for confession, not just confession of, you know, confession to our God, or confession in prayer, but confession to one another. Like, it's this uplifting thing. It's like, oh man, that weight's off my back now that I've been able to talk about this and tell you where I'm struggling and tell you where I need a little bit of help. And you know, back to Evergreen, when somebody can meet you in love and say, you know what, man, I understand where you're coming from. I struggle with this too. Let's talk this together. Let's take this in prayer together to the Lord. Let's walk this out. Let's work on ways to improve each other. It's a beautiful thing. And I think that's something that was, you know, in the past of the church and everything else. And I think it's been an issue. I think dealing with sin has always been an issue, and we act like somebody else is dealing with a sin that we haven't dealt with, or, you know, just a struggle that we don't deal with. Well, if you're dealing with that, what's wrong with you, you know, and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, everybody's dealing with this. And if we talk about it, it would be so much easier to not have to deal with all these things anymore. We can deal with them together and work on them. You know, am I making sense there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sin itself has become its own stereotype that nobody wants to talk about because everybody always thinks that it's one certain thing. You know, there's just certain things in our lives that do not make us better people.
Right.
And if we'd be willing to stop lying to each other and just talk to each other and realize we're not alone, we would be so much better for it.
Yeah.
You know, we're all humans. We are all humans. I don't care where you've come from. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what your background is or what your beliefs are. We are all human beings, and we all know one another.
Yep.
And we are not alone.
Well, and just transparency and truth, those two words keep coming up. It's like, just be honest. You know, I tell my kids all the time, you know, if you would just tell me what happened, I wouldn't get upset about it. It's the fact that you're beating around the bush and lying to me and everything else that's making me upset at this point. You know, I don't care that you cracked that vase or broke that window or whatever, you know. It's when you've got every kid in the room and it's like, not me, not me, not me, not me. And it's like, hang on now, it's somebody, you know. So but
I think that we've become a society where we don't talk to each other, we talk at each other, and we don't have conversations, we have opinions.
Right.
And what's missing in all of that is our love for one another. That's exactly what's missing.
Which is so phenomenal. It's like, I can't tell you how many episodes we go in ready to talk about whatever, and it always boils down to love. And I wonder why that is. I wonder what those 2 commandments that Christ really tried to drive home, you know, what were those? And it's just like, you know, it's not that hard, yet it's so incredibly difficult.
And it's so hard because, you know, we're bombarded by 50 million things every single day, which trigger a response from us.
Right.
And if we can't control ourselves and we can't control how we respond to things, it could be ugly, you know?
Well, and I this is really, you know, kind of a good way to wrap this up a little bit, but I think what really baffles my mind is how the faithful expect the world to see things, and how we, I guess the word is judge, how we judge others for living a lifestyle that we may not agree with, when they don't even comprehend what it is that we're trying to say. I mean, they live in a different world. It's okay, you know, and we need to be able to just love and share with one another, instead of just saying, you know what, you do this and you live that way, so I can't even talk to you. I can't even, you know, do this or do that. There used to be a saying that, you know, you do your thing and let me do my thing, and we can agree to disagree and all those good things. And it just doesn't seem like we're there anymore. And it's not a one-sided issue. It's a two-sided issue. It's, you know, evangelicals, left, right, atheists, it's everybody. Everybody wants to be so militant about their position. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand, you know, what the real, I mean, I guess I do understand in some ways what the real narrative is behind it, because I believe it's more spiritual than anything else. I do believe that, you know, there is a battle being fought. But it's just interesting to me how tough it is to come together. And, you know, we talk a little bit about the 70s right there after like Vietnam and stuff, and how so many songs were about coming together and love and, you know, spirit in the sky, come together, oh happy day, put your hand in the hand of the man that calmed the waters. And, you know, it was just such a pivotal moment in music where it was like there was a redirection taking place in some way. And we're talking about like top 40 hits, not just, you know, so, you know, when the narrative speaks to love and when it goes back in that direction, you sort of feel it in the air, so to speak, you know.
Well, it makes you, hopefully makes you understand that you're not alone, you know. what Shane and I wrote, our last single that we wrote, Suicide Lake.
Mm-hmm. Which is a great song, by the way.
Thank you.
We'll link to that one. You folks need to check that out. It was beautiful.
Yeah, Shane actually saw an image on Facebook, and it said something to the effect of, suicide does not take the pain away, it just gives it to someone else.
Yeah.
And he shared that with me, and I think he really felt like that there was a song there somewhere. And I'm like, you know what? There is. I feel like we need to write something about this, and we need to share the perspective of those people that are left behind to deal with that tragedy. One of the things that was a very difficult song to write from a lyrical perspective. I struggled with that for quite some time because I wanted to try to really get at the core of what it felt like to be the person who was thinking about committing suicide and be the person who was left behind after someone had done that. And I think that the song turned out absolutely beautifully, and goes back to that message that Shane saw on Facebook, that suicide doesn't take the pain away, it just gives it to someone else. And the message of that song is you're not alone. You're not alone in all the things that we experience on a daily basis. A lot of those things try to make us feel alone and isolated and not a part of one another's world. And that's not true. That is not true at all. We are all in this together, and we have to stick by one another, and we have to understand that my life impacts your life and your life impacts someone else. And that's the beauty of life. That is the beauty of our hearts and the fact that they beat every single day. And that's what unites us. Yeah. And I just hope that people, if they listen to that song, I hope that it touches their hearts, and that they get the message of that, and that they realize that no matter what they're going through, they're not alone.
Well, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because that song, like when I listened to that, I was like, whoa, and I had to listen to it again and take it all back in again, because it was just whoa. But and really wrapping this up right here, because I think this all comes together when you look at what we've been through in this year. We've talked about it a little bit, but people are still like what we're doing right here, right now. It's like, even though we're isolated, even though we're really being called to social distance and do this and do that, we come back to this whole narrative. I got to see somebody. I've got to talk to somebody. I want to be a part of this. And you see all this Zoom, and just, these companies got to be loving some of this stuff, because I mean, on a daily basis, I'm in a different narrative than what I ever was, but it still includes people. It still includes connecting, and it's just a different form. And, it's not quite the same without the physical hugs, touches, stuff like that. But there's still, that connection of humanity that we've talked about. And, it really comes down to our Maker and the way He's designed us to love and to see that through Him. I mean, that's what it really, really, boils down to.
It goes back to that song Evergreen,
Yeah, totally.
True love is always evergreen. It always renews. It always forgives. It always looks for the best. It strives. It's patient. It's very, very, very long suffering. It's all those things, and we need that.
Well, and one of the really cool parts of that song too, I thought was really neat, was how they talked about the snow and how the April roses are still up underneath there. And so even when you're going through those rougher, colder, darker moments of life, it's still there. And remember
Right.
that, and know that, and look for that underneath whatever you're going through, and don't focus so much on that snow. And I always think, when I think of winter, I think of the trees being bare, and just, of course, living in Florida, this doesn't happen now, but when I lived in Kentucky, man, I just think of how everything looked so dead. There were no leaves anywhere, but you always knew that spring was right around the corner. And life's kind of the same way. It's like his love is it's right there in whatever those seasons are you're going through, and just keep pushing ahead and know that it's there, ready to, spring back into whatever it is that you're heading towards. Our pastor always talks about life is a storm, and it's either before the storm, during the storm, or after the storm. You're always in one of those phases. And, his love permeates each one of those. So
Yeah, and that is the promise of hope.
mm-hmm.
And we can't lose hope. We can't lose our faith. And we have to realize that promise is never broken. It will always renew. It will always renew. It will always be there. We just have to not forget that, which is so easy to do. So easy to do. Every moment of the day, it's so easy to forget.
Yep, definitely.
But, yeah.
Well, Brenda, it's been so awesome having you on the show. Are there any last words you'd like to get in there? Anything new going on with, of course, the music industry right now is really kind of taking a halt, but is there anything on that back burner we can be expecting? Any surprises coming up? Anything of that nature?
Well, Shane and I are writing music. It's going slowly,
Right.
obviously, but right now, but we do have some songs that we're working on, and I'm particularly excited about one song in particular. I won't give away any details about it, but I'm very excited about it, and so we'll see what happens. I mean, we're not performing out right now, just obviously because of for obvious reasons, but I think now's a good time for everybody to just chill out and reflect. And I think at the end of the day that all of this happening is going to be end up being a blessing for musicians, singer-songwriters, live performances, the entertainment industry.
Sure.
And people are going to have a revival of that love for those things because of the lack of those things.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, so we've relaunched a lot of our, website and stuff of that nature. And, I didn't touch on this Monday, but just so and just so everybody listening knows, we're going to also put a link to what's called guests on our page. And what that'll do is kind of highlight each guest that we've had and really talk about their social media, and maybe even try to keep up with a Spotify playlist and that kind of good thing. So
Very
it's really
cool.
got access to all your stuff right there, so they don't
Very
always
good.
have to go to the episode link. They just go to guests and see everybody that's been on the show. So
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a wonderful talking to you. A shout out real quick to obviously Barbra Streisand and the gentleman who wrote Evergreen.
definitely.
I would definitely tag her on this episode, and
Yes.
And I hope she appreciates the song being featured. So
Definitely. So that's the end of this episode, folks. This is Rocking Odd Todd signing out, and just be sure to love God, love people, and love Pat. You guys take care. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Song and Verse podcast. Hopefully it was an uplifting, honest, and meaningful experience for you. We do accept donations. If you feel led to give to the Song and Verse Ministries, check out songandverseministries.com/donate for a number of different ways to give back. And also be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. We hope you tune in to the next episode of the Song and Verse podcast. Until then, keep searching for the DNA of God's Word found flowing through song.